If you play Rust and your FPS is constantly unstable, especially on high population servers, you already know this game is not the type where any random PC build will feel good. Today I'm going to explain calmly and clearly what kind of PC you should build specifically for Rust if we're not talking about cheap options. No minimum builds, no painful compromises. I'll give you a list of CPUs and GPUs that actually make sense for the next couple of years, and I'll explain the logic behind each choice so you understand why these parts matter and you don't waste money. One important thing before we start: Rust often doesn't bottleneck the same way other games do. On large servers, near big bases, inside towns and during fights, Rust is very CPU heavy. So I'll start with CPUs, then GPUs, and after that I'll briefly cover SSDs and RAM, because those also affect stutters, loading, and overall smoothness. AM5 top picks for Rust. If we talk about the absolute best performance in Rust right now, the most consistent path is the AM5 platform, especially X3D processors. My top tier picks are Ryzen 7 7800X3D, Ryzen 7 9800X3D, Ryzen 9 7950X3D. If your goal is the highest and most stable FPS in Rust, X3D chips are usually the best choice because the extra cache helps a lot in real gameplay. The Ryzen 9 7950X3D makes sense if you don't only play. If you also stream, edit, or do heavy work and you want extra multi-core power. By choosing these processors, you'll be able to get the maximum performance possible compared to most other players. AM4, the strongest upgrade without changing everything. If you already have AM4 and you don't want to replace your motherboard and memory, the smartest high-performance upgrade for Rust is Ryzen 7 5700X 3D or Ryzen 7 5800X 3D. For Rust, this is one of the most noticeable upgrades you can do on AM4, especially in heavy areas and on busy servers. On Intel, the strongest picks from my list are Core i7 13700KF, Core i9 14900KF. These CPUs are extremely powerful, but the key is building them correctly. You need good cooling and a stable platform, otherwise temperatures and throttling can hurt consistency. For AM5, if we're not talking about X3D chips, the two models I mean are Ryzen 5 9600X, Ryzen 7 9700X. In Rust, these can be weaker than the top X3D options, and they can also cost more because you're paying for the newer platform. Now let's talk about the strong options that are not the most expensive. For AM4, Ryzen 7 5800X or Ryzen 7 5700X. Ryzen 5 5600X. These are solid CPUs for Rust if the rest of your system is built properly. If you want the most future-proof feel for Rust, I still prefer the X3D route, but these CPUs can absolutely do a good job. For Intel, if you want a powerful setup without going to i9, Core i5 14600K, Core i5 13600K. They can perform very well in Rust, as long as cooling and the motherboard are not weak. Now for graphics cards. The rule is simple: the higher your resolution and settings, the more the GPU matters. Here are the best GPUs from my list: RTX 5090, RTX 5080, RTX 4080 Super, RTX 4070 Ti Super. On AMD, RX 7900 XTX, RX 7900 GRE, RX 7900 XT. These are the most powerful options for their price range. And now the normal price options from my list. On NVIDIA, RTX 5060, RTX 5070, RTX 4060. On AMD, RX 7600, RX 6700 XT, RX 6600 XT, RX 5700 XT. To summarize, in Rust, it's often smarter to invest into the CPU first, especially if you play on busy servers. I listed parts that make sense for the next couple of years, so you don't build something that immediately feels limited. Now SSDs. This matters more than most people think. If you only have one SSD, and it has Windows, Rust and all your programs together, that can cause stutters and worse loading behavior. My recommendation is simple. SSD number 1, Windows and programs. SSD number 2, ideally an M2 drive, games, and preferably Rust on that drive. I do not recommend HDD for Rust. For specific models, just focus on good quality and enough storage The idea is having a clean system drive and a separate game drive. RAM is also important. The absolute minimum right now is 16GB at 3200 MHz, and that is only the minimum. For a comfortable Rust experience, I recommend 32GB. For memory speed guidance, AM4, 2200 up to roughly 3733 MHz. AM5, 6000 MHz is a great target. Intel from my list on DDR5, 6000 MHz minimum. The most important thing is stability. Stable memory is better than unstable overclocking. And finally, if you have good hardware, but your FPS still bad, sometimes it's not only the game, it's your system. Windows issues, background programs, drivers, temperatures, and storage can all hurt consistency. Sometimes reinstalling Windows or properly optimizing your PC makes a bigger difference than changing a single in-game setting. If you want, in the next video I can go through Rust settings for FPS and explain what actually improves performance and what barely changes anything. I hope everything was clear. I tried to keep it as short as possible so I wouldn't waste your time. Thanks for watching. I wish you all the best and see you next time. Bye bye.